Hi, welcome to the Conversation Shop with Cedric Page. Very happy to have you today. I have a very special guest on my show today, Mr. Troy Bowles, entrepreneur, Mr. Atlanta, Georgia native, extraordinaire, brother, best friend, family member, confidant, you name it. Nothing but love and blessings to you, Mr. Bowles. Very happy to have you, sir.
I'm happy to be here. Absolutely.
Yes, again, guys, we're going to be discussing on the show today, women. Specifically, throughout the show, the question we're going to be asking is, do women or have women in the past and more specifically now, are they teaching men how to be men, specifically men of color, men that look like me? I can't give any other perspective, but if there's other perspectives, by all means, go to Facebook Live and comment and give me that perspective. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear a woman's perspective on this. But again, I want to say that we always talk about men, the issues with men. Specifically, we throw African American men, Latino men, men of color under the bus all the time as it pertains to being fathers, when we know in reality that we're really good fathers to our kids. But we're talking about and speaking specifically to the notion and the fact that, in most of the households, minority households, their kids, males and women, are being raised by their moms or their grandparents. So the question is, can you or are women teaching these men how to be men? And is that being reflected in society right now? Those are the questions we're going to explore, and we're going to just dive right on into the conversation right now, Troy. I mean, the main question we want to talk about, and let's give the definition of what we're talking about. So when we talk about, the value systems that women are teaching or mothers are teaching their children, right? So let me put it in context before I let you comment. So to put it in context, when we say old, we're talking about old school. We're talking about there were, women, specifically black women, teaching young men and young girls how to survive, but teaching black men how to survive and how to raise their families in the midst of slavery, while these men were being hung, while these men were being chased down, while these men were being in these fields, while these men were being purposely separated from their families and being sold off. So these women, these matriarchs, were raising these men. These are the things we don't want to acknowledge. And they were teaching these men how to be men. So the question is, how was that reflected, in the past? Well, we have the Thurgood Marshalls, we have the Black Wall Streets, we have the education, the focus on education, the focus on excellence. All of those things come out of the household. Why do I say out of the household? It comes out of the household because when you're born, the first place that you learn anything from is from your parents. It's from your home. So that's where you're going to self-identify. That's where you're going to learn your value system, from home. And if it's just women in the house, I'm sorry, man, you learn how to be a man from a woman. And that's just the fact. Now, with that being the case, we want to explore the good and the bad of that. So, Troy, why don't you start by giving me your definition or examples of the value systems, of your perspective on the value systems of women, specifically women of color, specifically black women, currently and in the past.
Well, just as you said a little earlier, this is not to bash women or anything like that. Men, have a role to play, obviously, in this as well. But the finger is always pointed at men. All right. So what I want to talk about is the role that women should be playing in the raising of, specifically, as you say, young black men. And I'm going to preface that by saying, telling a little bit about, my story. Mm-hmm. All right. So my mother had me as a teenager. She was 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they had as they say in the South, a shotgun wedding, where the parents of the children kind of forced them to get married once a pregnancy has occurred. All right, so that was my situation. So my mother and father, being so young, they actually broke up very quickly and got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
So that left a young, just out of her teens, mother to raise a young man.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there was definitely a lot of bitterness there and hostility, right, in her, rearing of me.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same light, I presume that a lot of young men that were raised by their mother felt the same thing. I think that, and mind you, my grandmother actually had to, kind of take control of the situation and actually raise me up, my grandmother and my grandfather.
Tell me, what were the differences in some of the values that your grandmother represented for you versus what we've seen versus, let's say, what your mother, as you have grown and your mother have raised you, I'm assuming separately or together, was that a similar value system, or if it was separately?
No, it was completely different.
So if it was separately, let's talk, because when I talk about your grandmother, that's old. When we talk about moms, or when I talk about my mother or the women in my life, then that's new. So tell me, share with me the differences between those values.
Well, the biggest difference is the fact that my mother was actually trying to be a career woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which means a lot of times for dinner we ate Burger King and fast food and stuff like that, and which means a lot of times she wasn't home. She wasn't available to be there, okay, because she was working all the time, all right? And in addition to that, she's a young woman in those days, so she's dating and different things like that, right?
But we all remember what we talked about earlier. All of that being constant. Let's not get off task. We know dating, we know careers, we know racism, we know all the things that are stacked against women and men and women of color. We know all of those things, right? So all of that being constant, push that off to the curb. Because what I don't want to do is, I'm gonna let you talk, but what I don't want us to do is create spaces of excuses. I don't want to talk about.
Not what
I don't want to talk. But give me 1 second. I'm gonna let you talk, Troy. Let's try to avoid talking about the reasons why they were in their situation, and let's just talking about that experiences or their responsibility to teach you these values. Let's focus on that. And for my audience, I want to be very straightforward with you about this. This show is not about, we know racism exists. We know there's things in place to keep fathers out of the household. We know things are stacked against the minority family. We know all of these things. With all of those things constant, this show isn't about talking about those things. So when we're talking about women and family, we're not talking about any of those things. We're pushing that to the side, and we're just focusing on the dynamic of mothers teaching values to their children, and are those values being reflected in the community. Troy, we got about 2-3 more minutes before we go into the break. I'm going to let you finish.
Okay. All right. So what I was stating was I was trying to put together the differences between the two. So my grandmother obviously was more traditional, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And she had a more traditional upbringing and value system. I mean, you're talking about different days and times. But my mother...
but tell me about those different days and time value systems.
That's what I was doing. Okay. Yeah, that's what I was doing. So my mother was a young woman trying to make a career for herself, so therefore she wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And what the Bible says is that a child left to himself will bring shame to his parents. Gotcha. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I was trying to piece together, not making an excuse, but just telling exactly what happened. Gotcha. And I think that is the mindset of a lot of younger girls today. You know, they're thinking about, you know, they have children, they have them young. Most times they select the wrong type of gentleman to even have a child with. That's number one. And what happens is they're thinking about progressing in their own personal life. And when it's so much so that the son and even daughters too are neglected to some degree. All
Right,
right.
but what are the values they're teaching them? Tell me some of the values.
They're not teaching them any values.
So they're not teaching them any values.
Well, the values that they're teaching them are.
Because you're saying a lot. Think about what you're saying. Because we're
school.
saying that these young moms aren't teaching these kids any values. So I'm being clear. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, what I'm saying is I don't want to make a blanket statement that says that, you know, all young moms are not teaching kids any values.
That's why I want you to clarify.
But in this new, especially in this new social media age, you know, I see girls sometimes and they're doing provocative videos and different things like that, and they have their kids in the same video with them.
Well, that's a value. So what value are they
That's
teaching?
a terrible value.
Right, but tell me what value does it represent for you? Is that promiscuity? Is that, you know, is that saying represent yourself intellectually? Is that telling your kids that education is important, which is a value? It's telling your kids to better themselves. That's a value. It's telling your kids to prepare the way for those behind them, a value. Or it's telling your kids there are no rules. The white man is against you, coming out of our society, and figure it out, because going to school, getting a job ain't gonna do nothing for you. That's a value too. So which values, I'm trying to get you to verify which values are you stating are being taught?
Well, all I can say is for myself.
Right,
you know
but be specific about the value. That's what I want you to lay out.
Well, I will say this, speaking from my story, right? The value that I got from my mother was work hard, get an education.
Gotcha.
And all of those kind of like cookie cutter things that, you know, people tell their children and lay out for their children. Okay?
Okay.
What I did not get was time.
Okay.
See, things are okay. And a lot of these young girls, they're making enough money. They're making more money than some of the guys, right? But what's more important than things, nice clothes and shoes and all that for the child, is time spent with the child, communicating with the child, sitting and having dinner. You know what I mean? Asking, how was your day at school? Tell me a little bit about what happened today.
Okay.
You know, those valuable things are what I missed, and that's what I see a lot of children or younger kids are missing today.
So are you saying that the younger moms are not teaching their kids to value family?
I wouldn't put it as strong as to say that they're intentionally not teaching them that, but I think that in a roundabout way, yes, that they're not implementing family values into the relationship with the children. Specifically, we're talking about young boys, all right?
Okay, so when you say...
So when a young boy sees his mother is, you know, actively dating, some of these young ladies, they bring men around their children too early, that they're dating.
We're going to talk about that in a different segment. Hold that thought.
Okay.
But let's just talk about these values. We got about one more minute. Give me about 30 seconds to kind of talk about that a little bit, Troy.
Okay. Well, as far as those values are concerned with young ladies and their sons, to sum it up in 30 seconds, I would say that they really need to sit down, communicate better with the child, with the son, right? And maybe even implement some other male figures that are family members that are positive into the boy's life.
Right. I understand. And guys, before we go into the break, what I'm going to do is, you know, when we come back from the break, what I'm going to do is pick up on this and share with Troy and the audience, you know, my perspective on the topic on the first segment. Then we're going to dive right into We're going to dive right into how do those values affect the children and how those represented, those value systems that are being taught by a woman-led household, how is that being reflected in the actions, the movements, the dress, the clothing? How is that being reflected in the children? We'll be right back on the Conversation Shop. Hi, welcome back to the Conversation Shop. I'm here with my very special guest, Mr. Troy Bowles. Troy, say hi to my audience.
How you doing, guys?
I'm very happy to have Troy on the show. On the first segment, we're talking about mothers. We're talking about, has there been a shift in the value system between old moms, your grandmother's generation, your mom's generation, and the younger generation? Has there been a shift in that value system? And one of the main things we're talking about is, number one, what do we mean when we say value system? We talked about taking care of family. We talked about honesty. We talked about education. We talked about work. We talked about not having time for family. We talked about those different things. Mr. Bowles actually discussed or gave examples of growing up in the household with his mother who had him when she was young, and his grandmother, mother being a career woman, grandmother being at home, and kind of teaching him or showing him examples of different things. So we're going to dive right back into this conversation. And Mr. Bowles, what I'm going to do is talk to you about, give you an example of what I mean by that value system, and by using my life as an example. So for instance, in my life, my grandmother, the value systems that I was taught by her, because my mother also had me young, 15, 16 years old. I was in the house with her mom, and then I was in the house with my dad's mom. I kind of was in a couple different spaces, but the one thing in my life that was constant was women. And what was a constant absence was a male. So that's something that this whole conversation that we're having made me think about. And that's just the fact. So as I'm being brought home from the hospital, a premature 2.5-pound baby, being in the hospital for months, finally coming home, when I come home, I have no values. I don't know what my name is. I don't know what they call me. I'm hearing Cedric. So everything that I'm learning from the household that I'm in. So values meaning love your family, meaning take care of your brothers and sisters, meaning go to school, get an education, be better than who we are, put family first, be honorable, put God first. Those are values that were important, and those are things that my grandmother raised me and instilled in me, versus the things that you observe and you get from a young woman having a kid, having a child, the child having a child, teaching them values that children have, meaning, there's nobody at home cooking 3 meals a day. Your mother may have to go to work, as Troy said, and provide for the family, which means she may be gone. So you don't have that connection of a mother being available to her child. Also talking about, in the household hearing negative things where your daddy's not here, or you hear my baby daddy, my baby mama, but your dad's not here, your dad's not doing this. So all you're hearing about the other person is negativity, negative, negative, negative. And then the values that you're seeing your mom go to work, but because she's young and she's acting out, hasn't become an adult yet, doesn't know what it means to being adult and have a child, is acting like she's a woman that doesn't have a child, doing a lot of different things, having men around the children that may not have values that you want your children even being taught. So there's a lot of different things that come up in the equation. And reflecting back to me and my life, on one hand, I'm going to church, I'm doing all these, respectable things with my grandmother. On the other hand, I go to my mom's house and I'm just being real. I'm doing a lot of street stuff. I'm on the corner. I'm doing stuff. I'm doing what I want to do because the rules of engagement have changed. My grandmother's on me. Watch it. You better be in at 10 o'clock. You better not do this. You better not do that. Making sure she's on me to make sure I don't have time to get in trouble. My mother's concerned with doing other things, feeding, putting food in the house, and then mama got to have a life too. When you're young, that's what you think. So I'm going out in the community doing whatever I want to do. And as you said, Troy, you give young boys freedom, or as you suggested, you give young boys freedom. We use that freedom sometimes to get into trouble. So if we don't have the right values that are in us, meaning get your butt home at a certain time, do your homework. I'm going to check your homework when you get home. I'm going to make sure that you get these good grades because getting good grades are going to get you into college. Getting into college is going to get you a good job or getting a trade or whatever that may be. Taking care of your family, those kind of values, Troy. I just want to lay out what I mean by that. So I'm coming in a household and I'm seeing a bunch of different things and seeing a young woman act like a young woman. And I call it acting like she's in college, but not in college, okay? And
Right.
forgetting that they have a child. Where on the other hand, I have a grandmother who knows how to be an adult, knows how to take care of a family, knows how to cook meals, put those meals on the table, knows how to go to the PTA meetings, knows how to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do, holding you accountable, letting you know that they care through action and time. See, that's the difference that I see between the old and new generation. And as I look past my mother and look to the even newer, younger generation, daddy's not in the house. Women that I've dated, house toe up, not being respectable. I mean, come on. If I walk in the house, your house, you got dirty Pampers, you got stuff everywhere. You don't know how to take care of a house. You don't know how to
Yeah.
take care of a man. You don't know how to take care of your child. It's a
Yeah.
problem. And then again, going back to talking about your child's dad, right? You got a bad experience. You got your child hating your father, right? Hating his dad. So what is he going to think about the next guy next to him that he looks like him? Is he going to have a problem with him? Is he going to hate him? So it comes back to this self-hate thing, us not trusting each other. If I can't trust my dad, then I can't trust my uncle. I can't trust my brother. Who can I trust? So it's a lot of things that come up. So again, Troy, and to my audience, I just wanted to elaborate on that perspective. Troy, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I do. I completely agree with what you were saying, but I instead of an opinion, I have a question for you because you brought something up that just kind of jogged my mind a little bit when you said that your grandmother were doing things a certain way and instilling certain values in you, and your mom was kind of, being immature, like a college girl or what have you, and not really taking care of her responsibilities to the fullest, such as your grandma did. So and that was the same scenario with my life as well.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, if our grandmothers were so responsible and they did everything, they installed values in their children, what happened
Right.
to where, you know what I
Let's
mean?
talk about that.
So my
Let's
question,
talk
what
about
happened?
Okay, Troy, you want to hear my perspective on that?
I want to hear your perspective on that.
My perspective on that, Troy, about what happened is this. What happened is we forgot who we were. You got to remember we had an influx of young people having kids when you and I were coming up, right? Young people
That's
having
true.
kids. You had the crack epidemic where kids were raising kids, or kids in households with no moms, kids being taken and put into the county, a state custody, doing different things. So when you ask yourself what happened, the absence of parents in the household is what happened. That's what happened. That's what happened. And then when you have media, the TV is what happened as well. You have media and the images on the media. Think about when we were young, Troy. The images that we saw of women, specifically women of color, they may have been maids or they may have not had corporate jobs, but they were women who went home and took care of their families. They cooked meals. They took care of their husband. It was a husband at home. We saw this on television. You know, I grew up in a house. It blew my mind to know people grew up in apartments. You know, I couldn't, that blew my
Oh
mind.
yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
understand what
Yeah,
I'm saying? So that's a perspective
yeah,
that I can't even relate to. So when you
right.
ask again what happened, again, I'm going to say the parents left the household. It's what happened. And what I mean by that, then when you have kids having children, they don't know how to teach. If they don't know how to be good parents and have good values, how are they going to teach them to their kids? And then we have,
Hmm.
remember, those are the baby kids. Remember baby kids?
Correct.
Bad, or they call them ghetto kids. Remember
Yeah,
ghetto
yeah,
kids, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
we put all these negative connotations on those kids, right? We put all these negative connotations on these kids, but it's a reflection of the values at home, and it's a reflection of the mother.
It
Think
is.
about this.
It
You're a guy,
is.
Troy, and you see your mom with 6, 7 different men coming in the house in a year.
Hmm.
They, you know, and we know what's going on, and your children are watching this. Are you teaching them that you're respectable? Are you teaching them to respect women? Are you teaching them to even respect you? You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And again, they're doing the best that they can. So value is right. Get you a good man with a job, or get you a man with money. So take that whole concept, get you a man with money, Troy. Now it's a dope dealer. Now it's a dope man. Now it's a man that's
Okay.
caught up in all kind of negative things. So all you want to do is get a man with money, have a baby, have create another situation where the child doesn't have a dad and you fighting with the dad just to get money to move forward. Not saying all women do that, but this is a situation that we have to talk about. Go ahead, Troy,
I'm
comment.
I'm I'm glad you said that because that was another thing that I thought about, and that was, I know it's kind of veering off a little bit, but it actually is still spot on, and that is economics.
Mm-hmm.
Because the economic level of the individual female, I think, matters as well. Because if she's on welfare, she's living in the projects, or whatever the case may be, that mentality is going to affect the child and how she even raises the child.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? If there's lack of money in the household, they had and I'm not saying that this was the scenario with this young lady, but they had a young lady in the news that they arrested here in Atlanta not too long ago. Her 3-year-old daughter was being left at home while she was working at night. 3 years old, at home by herself. All right,
Ridiculous. Value
and
system. We talking about value systems though.
right, and the child ended up dying. And when they found the baby was weighing 15 pounds at 3 years old.
And she
She
knew that
died of
baby. She
starvation.
knew she wasn't feeding that baby.
She knew she wasn't feeding the baby, right? And so that's just an example.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure. It's hard for me to even put myself in the state of mind of some of the things that some of the females that are raising these young kids are doing these days. You're in the club stripping, or like you said, dating multiple men. You're all on Instagram, traveling the world. Where are the 3 kids that you just showed on Instagram
With
a month
grandma,
ago?
with another woman.
Exactly. Right. So when you asked me the question earlier, man, one of the things that came to my mind, and you really are bringing up a lot of, you're really bringing up a lot of things that I thought about, growing up. And just to sum it up, and that was time being spent with the children, man.
And let's talk about that on
Time,
the
and I
next segment.
think,
Let's talk
yeah.
about that. We will be right back on the Conversation Shop. Welcome back to the Conversation Shop. Troy Bowles and I, my very special guest, we're having a very interesting conversation about mothers. And I'm sorry, specifically mothers of color. You know, my mother is a person of color. Troy's mother is a person of color. So that's the perspective that we can only give. So the question is, have the value system changed with women, and are women responsible for teaching men, specifically men of color, how to be men? So that's permeating through this whole conversation as we explore different aspects of that. So my guest and I, Mr. Troy Bowles, talked about what is the difference between those value systems. Whereas your grandmother go to church, be home, spend time with your family, cook those meals, be a supportive wife or supportive girlfriend, take care of the family, teach education, moving forward, those good things. Versus new world, got to go to work, may not have time for you, may not get a chance to see you. Hurry up and watch TV or get out of the house and go do something so mama can have her fun. Versus the newer generation who are just, I don't even know what to say. So we're gonna talk about different aspects of that. Troy, we talked about on the last segment, when we were discussing how does that value system affect kids, you were talking about time and how the lack of time is something that came out when I was giving my description between the old and the new. So go on and elaborate a little bit for me, please.
Yes, correct. Yeah, I think in a nutshell, when we talk about value systems, as you were, so eloquently stating earlier, I think that the value system that stands out to me the most and that affected me the most was the fact that my mother didn't spend as much time with me. And, and
how did that make you feel, Troy?
How did it make me feel?
As a child, how did that affect
it.
you?
I just accepted it. You know what I mean?
But did you think it was Did you think it was normal? Did you think it wasn't normal? Did it make you angry? Did it make you resent her?
No, it didn't make me resent her, but it did make me feel a little bit. It was a little bit depressing at times. It made me feel like I don't necessarily fit into your life.
Did you feel like you had a mom? Was she a mom in name, but not a mom in action? Do you feel like grandma was mama?
No, she was a mom in name and action.
Okay.
But like I said, the lack of time that was allotted to me as her son affected me because, again, when you have a young man, especially, and there's no father in the home, and mom is not spending adequate amount of time with the child. That's the only parent that's there, that's left. So then what happens is, as they used to say back in the day, the streets will raise you. All right? So that's what we have a lot of, I feel, today, is we have a lot of the streets raising.
But hold on to that thought
boys.
Before we go into the streets raising. I wanna elaborate and talk a little bit about the mom in the household and the lack of time and how that made you feel, right? So for me growing up, right? I'm gonna share something with me real quick. For me, when I was coming up and I was with my grandmother, I felt like my mother didn't have time for me. I felt like every time I went because I used to go visit my mom. I live with my mother, don't get me wrong, but when I lived with it, sometimes it felt like a visit.
Yeah.
And so when I was, at my mom's house, I honestly, a lot of times it just felt like, let me put it in perspective, when she was younger, not older mom, younger mom, still
right.
young, because I grew up with my mother. So I'm talking about 17, 18-year-old mom.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
17, 18, 20-year-old mom, not having time. So I felt like she didn't want me. I felt like she put her relationships before me. You understand what I'm saying? So I clung to my grandmother. I clung to my aunts. I clung to those women that seemed to be my protectors.
Right.
And again, I have to admit, going back to the question, were they teaching me how to be a man? I'm sorry. That's all that I was being around. So they were teaching me at the time I was a boy how to be a man. So all of the emotional responses I had, that came from being around women. Crying easily, being emotional, came from being around women, being in touch with that. I'm proud to say that I am now, but before, when I was younger, that was an issue. So I started to, even though I was a man in body, some of the emotional things, keyword emotional aspects of me, were reflective of growing up around women. Now, my value system was always that of a man. So don't let me get it twisted. Only a man can teach a man the value systems of being a man. So what I
Correct.
mean by are women teaching men how to be men? What I mean by that is women are teaching men how to be men from a woman's perspective, what she thinks a man should be, what she thinks a man should do, how she thinks a man should act. And quite frankly, that could be 360 degrees away from what a man should actually be doing. So that's what the aspect that I'm trying to come from on this show today. That aspect, again, 360 degrees away from what you should be doing. Should you be an emotional man? So if a woman, my grandmother used to tell me, men don't cry. Men are hard. Men do certain things. Those were the values she taught me. So she was also teaching me how to be cold to a woman. Cold. She was teaching me how to be forceful. Those were good traits in some aspects, but I paid for it in my relationships because my relationships suffered because I didn't understand how the give and take, the ebb and flow of being in a relationship with a woman. I had to learn how to be that way. So again, talking about how it affected me negatively and made me act out negative, forced me, quite frankly, to be selfish, to only think of myself, and to act out selfishly negatively. Again, Troy, I'm gonna let you talk.
I had a question for you, though, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, what would be the solution, you think, if a woman, as they say, cannot teach a man how to be a man, and there is no other man figure around? What is a woman to do?
A woman is to go out as she's dating, be mindful of the kind of men that you're bringing your son around, your child around. Make sure that they have the values that you want your son to emulate. And you give that man access to your son, whether that be a mentor, whether that be a family member, whether that be your brother, or whether that be your mate. You have to be mindful to keep positive role models around your children, active role models around your children to push them forward in a positive way. Now, I had good, bad, and the ugly, and to be honest with you, I'm proud of all aspects of that because it made me a well-rounded person. But as a kid, I suffered for not having a really strong male role model in my life that was positive. I suffered for that. And what I say by that is, I saw my grandfather getting up every day. My dad wasn't in trouble or doing anything negative at all. It wasn't from them. This is what I'm not talking about. It didn't come from my dad. The men my mother had around and who she was dating, that's where this negative stuff was coming from. No knock, Mom. I love you, but it's just real. So that was the reflection. Again, she was young, making mistakes that young people make.
Right.
Okay? And the children sometimes, are the casualties of war. So what we're going to do as we move forward is talk about the reflection of those casualties of war being reflected in society now. Black on black crime, right? Not caring about a person that looks like you. We talk about marching and police killing young black men, but we never march when we hear about black men killing young black men and the self-hate attached to that. That self-hate is taught at home. We're taught to hate ourselves. So the question is, are women teaching us to hate ourselves? To hate other black people? That's a question. That's a real question. Maybe intentionally or unintentionally, because you're telling me not to like my dad. You're telling me my dad ain't about ish. You're telling me you haven't heard that word, niggas ain't it, right? You
Right.
want to use that word. We're hearing that all the time, right? Oh, you ain't going to be nothing. You're not going to do nothing. You ain't going to go to college. You can get a degree. You ain't all these negatives. And when you
Yes.
think about them, you're hearing negatives from women.
Yes. No, I actually checked my mother on that some years ago because all that she ever had to say about my father was negative. Mind you, I didn't see much of my father at all my entire life. I mean, 10 years would go by before I would see my father again. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So he never played a part any part in my life, but at the same time, he's still my father. Mm-hmm. So you affect me when you say negative things about him because I'm a replica of him, right? So I agree with you. Women need to definitely be mindful of the things that they're saying about the child's father, even if he's not a good dad.
What about the men that she's bringing around the kids?
Well, that's a whole nother story.
Talk about
it. I mean, the men that
that's
she's
values.
bringing around.
That's values
well,
too.
It is. That is value. Now, my mother dated. Obviously, she was a young woman when her and my father got divorced. They only stayed married like 2 years, so she probably was maybe 19 or 20 when she got divorced. So obviously, she dated. Now, some of the guys were okay.
Man, keep it real. Some of them was knuckleheads. You know they was knuckleheads.
Call
them knuckleheads.
That's what I'm saying. Some of them were okay, but a few of them were not good role models. You know what I mean? And there was a lot of issues. And at times, there was even a lot of violence in the household, you know, which affected me terribly. It made me very bitter. It made me angry. It also, you know, really, I honestly believe I may have suffered from post-traumatic stress.
I know I did.
Later on, you know what I mean? But back then, we didn't know what that was. At least I didn't. Never heard of the term.
Me neither.
But, you know, I was affected by a lot of the decisions that she made as a young mother. And like you said earlier, you know, my older mom, things were different. But the younger mom, you know, it was a bumpy road.
And it affected me. She made her mistakes with you.
She made all her mistakes with me. But even, and this is another thing, I don't want to get long-winded, but this is another thing. I'm glad you said that, because I have a younger brother. My younger brother's 13 years younger than me. But she even made mistakes with him, but different mistakes. Mm-hmm. And the main mistake that she made with my brother, I believe, is that she babied him. And that's a whole nother subject matter that a lot of women are doing with their young boys. They're babying them, and they're making them independent on other women.
So did you think they're demasculating the men?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Hold that thought, Troy. Hold that thought. We'll be right back on the Conversation Shop, guys. Welcome back to the Conversation Shop. My very special guest, Mr. Troy Bowles, and I are having some very good conversations today talking about women, and specifically women of color. The questions we were attacking are, has there been a shift in the value system between, you know, old school ladies, young school women, specifically women of color? You know, we're exploring, you know, what are those values that are being taught? You know, education, taking care of family, spending time with your family. Is that something that's important? You know, an important value, old school, young, new school, no time, acting like you're in college. You know, just kind of treating your child like they're your baby, over babying them, masculating the demasculization of those men in their households by their mothers. So we're going to explore and talk about how those values are manifesting themselves out in society. And Troy, I just want to dive right into this. You know, one of the aspects we talked about, and I'm going to dive into women. We've talked about mothers and their sons a lot. But one of the things I want to talk about is mothers and their daughters growing up in the same household with values, right? So let's say you got this mom, old school, talk about old school. Only what I saw my grandmother always teaching, you know, my aunt and other women and family members around her how to be a good woman, how to represent herself as a woman, always dressing well, head to toe, leaving the house, dressed well, going to work, taking care of her kids, being active in church. Not saying you got to go to church for those who don't believe in organized religion, but just being a responsible person in every way, performing their civic duties, just being active and pushing themselves forward, versus, you know, a young woman out here who may be dating multiple people, multiple men, working hard every day, making a good income, but she's a single woman, dating the wrong men. And outside of dating the wrong men, she's dressing, quite frankly, she's dressing like she's headed to the strip club to strip, you know. Then she's teaching her daughter, the quest for money. Money is king. So by the time your daughter gets 13 and someone tells her she has a nice body, especially in ATL, they run into the strip club. And the sad part is a reflection of that value system is the mother is probably she's either in this pushing her to go to the strip club, sharing the money, or she's in there stripping with her. So, those are things that I've observed, I've watched, and I've saw. So the value systems have definitely changed when it comes to that. Troy, you want to comment real quick on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, like I said, I've actually experienced that. I have seen someone who was a stripper or dancer, whatever you want to call them, and worked in the same club as their daughter, stripping, which blew my mind, right? Mm-hmm. But again, that goes back to what you were just alluding to, was the value system is flawed. Mm-hmm. And the thing about the mother, and the mother is really the centerpiece of the household, right? Dad is one thing, but children get most of their values.
They run straight to their mom. They run straight
to the mama. Yeah, exactly. So when you have a mom, what is the imagery that is being portrayed to that young girl when mom is walking around and her booty cheeks are hanging out?
Yeah, she teaches them that your body is, use your body to get what you want.
Exactly.
That's what she's teaching. Now hold that thought real quick, Troy. Let's talk about this aspect, right? Let's say you got your mom, and I see this emulated all the time, brother. You got these single households, your mom's babying the child, but your mother's out here dating all these different men. Your mother's made a lot of mistakes in her life with the men that she's chose. So all of a sudden, all her hopes and aspirations are on this good man that she's tried to raise, whatever that definition of a good man is. But part of that value system that she's taught is the quest for money, right? Because we got to have this. We got to show we got this. We got to have the Gucci. We got to have the Louis. All these things that really wealthy people don't even think about having, right? Mm-hmm. So, you got this guy out here, this young boy out here, and this young woman out here trying to fill the gap for all the mistakes that their mother made, trying to take care of their mother. And especially from a boy's standpoint, your mother's trying to act like your girlfriend. She's trying to compete with your girlfriend. Whatever trips you go on, she want to go on. Whatever car you drive, she need to have that car. Whether you go out and buy it for her or not, she probably expect you to get it. So there's a lot of different things that weight that's put it onto the child. And what I'm saying is that weight is leading to young people of color being murdered and killed out here trying to do whatever they can to get money the wrong way. Not education, school, jobs, working hard. And even when they do that, they shouldn't be taking care of their mamas. Yeah. But also, hear me out real quick, Troy. So they're going out, they're doing all these different things, selling, hustling, and getting murdered, right? Now you got the same mom, again, going back to teaching them your dad ain't nothing, other black men ain't nothing. You're seeing these weak men she's dating come around, so you don't have respect for anybody that looks like you. And then you wonder, now all of a sudden, what's inadvertently being created is self-hate. I hate people that look like me because my mother inadvertently has taught me to hate them. I hate these different things. So I don't care if I go out here in these streets and I do something to someone that looks like me. What she teaches me, you better not go out there and touch Mr. Jones, the white man around the corner. They're going to put you in jail for 20 years. But you can go kill Rufus, Mark, and Luther. You can be the mass murderer in the neighborhood and she won't care. So again, and then you have that same mom sitting in the house saying that she's teaching you good values, and you're going out into the community, you're hustling out of the house she's in. So she's benefiting from your negative stuff. So Troy, again, sorry to get a little long-winded comment on that for me, sir.
Well, yeah, I think that a lot of times these mothers, they look the other way because they're benefiting from it.
But that's a value.
That's a terrible value. all right? Because you walked in the room and saw Johnny or Pookie or whatever you want to call him cleaning his pistol, and you looked the other way. You didn't say anything about it. You got wind of the fact that he's slinging a little dope on the side here and there, all right? But he's paying the light bill, or he's paying for groceries. You know he don't have a job.
Pocket, but he put money.
He's put money in the pocket, right? You know he doesn't have a job. But then when he ends up on the news, either he shot or he done shot somebody. He was a good kid.
No, he ain't do nothing, but he done murdered 8 people in the neighborhood. But
Exactly.
He a good kid.
Exactly. But my point is this, said she saw the signs early on. She saw the sign months ago. She saw the signs a few years ago.
She didn't care.
That he was headed in a certain direction. She didn't care.
And leave us with some words.
When he was salvageable at 13, when you saw the signs, now he's 17, and it's harder for you to get through to him. But you saw the signs at 13, and you did nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, Troy, leave my audience with some words of wisdom real quick before we end the show.
Words of wisdom. Words of wisdom. Spend time with your children as much as you can. Give them wisdom. Also, work on your economics. Work on building a business for yourself. Learn how to invest your money, because when you do that, it opens up time for you to be able to spend with your family.
I got you, Troy. And last question. Do men learn how to be men from women?
No, absolutely not. That's the short answer.
Okay, the short answer. I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for being a guest on the show. Guys, I want to thank you for joining me on the Conversation Shop. Hopefully we've answered the question of, do men learn their values from women? I think we do. I thank you, and join us on the next Conversation Shop.